finally, after all these episodes, what an absolute perfect way to end off traditional YSM episodes. I'm so happy we finally get to talk about my favorite island in the entire franchise, Ethereal Island. Now, while this is a very actively loved song, it isn't perfect, and to exemplify this, we're leaving no stone unturned. Despite the fact that this island has a very large amount of monsters, we are going to pull a Celestial Island and rank everything from worst to best. We're going to be starting with the worst and work our way up from there, simply because the worst monster is far more predictable than the best one. And wow, what a shocker, the worst monsters on the island are the worst monsters in the entire game, the Dipsters. One thing you'll come to know about Ethereal Island is that everything is so balanced and layered and important that adding even the slightest bit of flourish over any of it is detrimental if not handled well. So you take the Dipsters, who are some of the loudest little twerps imaginable, and you just throw them on top of the most majestic part of the song, and you get something that is ruinous. I'll agree with the fact that these things sound good in a vacuum, but this isn't a vacuum. They ruin the best verse in the song, and when it's Ethereal Island, I start throwing hands. Number 16 on our list is another very obvious pick in Wubbox. Basically for the same reasons as well. Really loud, doesn't match the tone, covers up insanely well put together pieces, adds nothing of value. Pretty much the only two reasons it's not one, and Dipsters are, is that 1, it plays in a verse that isn't as good as the main chorus, and 2, it only plays once. Fitting that this series started with the Dipsters and Wubbox at the worst spots, and now it's ending with them right back at those spots. Alright, now we get into Ethereal Island proper, and to start us off we have Humbug. Now, don't go throwing fire at my house, because Humbug is amazing and sounds great. It's just, it doesn't add nearly as much as the others, and only plays in the later half of a single verse, which is a bit of a bummer. Not only that, but it's very hard to really hear it unless you have like 15 of them. Still though, those moments where it shines through, it really shines through. Up next we have Grumpire, who is as awkward in this song as it was on Cold, but luckily this song is much more welcoming to it. It doesn't have the most melodic voice or the most interesting rhythms, but it's so expressive and wildly creative that I appreciate it. I appreciate Grumpire more than I like it, and while it doesn't do anything really stand out, it adds to the song in many ways, none of them being negative. It's just that most of the time I'll be focusing on the more interesting parts of that verse over Grumpire. Alright, at number 13 we finally have Voodoo. Bet you didn't expect it to see it get this high, did you? Anyways, Voodoo has always been really nifty, and you don't notice just how much it adds to the song until it's gone. It helps make that first part feel much more lively and active since its missing components like Geode and Jelbilly don't show up until its reprise. Like Grumpire, you're not likely to focus on it or anything, but it has substance that makes it worth getting. I just find it more flattering of an addition that Grumpire can't really muster. At number 12 we have the big lizard Dragon, who adds a deep bass to the chorus that really helps it pop. It gets you moving, it hypes you up in an already invigorating verse. And it does all of this on an instrument that has nothing to do with its name origin. Pretty much the only issue I have with Dragon is that it never once plays the actual instrument it's named after, which is a trend that will see shows up a couple times on this island. Other than that, it's a really solid drum track that adds a ton of kick to the song's rhythm. Now we're getting into the real big boys. At number 11 we have Kazillion, who's one of the most unique vocals in all of MSM. I've heard countless people try to replicate Kazillion's voice and nobody has ever been successful. It is by far one of the most impressively put together vocals for that reason alone. In the actual song, it pairs ever so swimmingly with Nebula and Socks, giving each an extra punch to their tracks and adding a nice chorded line above it all. It carries its weight and then some, adding a ton with only 6 individual notes in the entirety of its track. With number 10, we get to the monster that starts off the whole song, Jelbilly. Something that's always a joy is when you can take a piece from one of the songs and recontextualize it into another part of the same song to make something new, and Jailbilly does that by being both an opener and a closer. The track itself is also so fun, being tonally distinct while still fitting in with the other pieces, and just being a downright joy to sing along to. This thing just oozes so much personality and charm, it's no wonder it's been so fondly remembered. Coming in on number 9, we have Oraculele. Questionable name aside, this thing sounds so good. The rhythm is perfect, the sound is so lively, the chords are lovely, and oh my gosh, it just is so good. The song could not function if you removed Oraculele. It's that good. The best part is in the first chorus. Voodoo helps punch the heavy hits Oraculele plays, and the two duet so beautifully together because of it that my brain just can't help but latch on to it hard. This monster adds charm, charisma, depth, rhythm, and balances it all out with a sweet dose of chords. It does it all. 8th place goes to Geode, who supplies the song with a very soothing and serene track that perfectly sets up what the song has in store going forward. It is the perfect leading instrument for the song, and it comes back masterfully in the end to give it some bliss that cannot be matched by any but one. Geode is as simple as the track itself. It's hard to put into words how good it is, but it only takes one listen to understand everything. It's here. It's finally here. At number 7 on the final episode of the series. At this point, we finally have my favorite monster in the franchise. We finally have Wisp. Wisp is the most charming, intriguing, mystifying, downright perfect monster I've ever seen, and a large part of that is how amazing its vocal performance is. It adds so much while doing technically very little, but the voice acting on it carries it into the flippin' stratosphere. It carries such an innocent but lost quality to it that laves that entire verse with a blissful serenity but beautiful feeling. It pairs beautifully with all of the major components of the verse, and all in all, I couldn't think of another monster I'd ever be willing to call my absolute favorite. However, ranking as the highest rated vocal on the island is the interesting case of Nebulahub. While it doesn't appear to be the most intricate thing at first, it quickly proves that looks can be deceiving, as this thing is wild. First off, the voice itself is really interesting, as it has almost an inhuman quality to it, yet it doesn't fall into any sort of uncanny valley. The track itself is where things start getting crazy, as this thing plays a rhythm and melody that is so far removed from anything playing in that part, yet somehow it feels like it fits right at home. It's masterfully put together, and the performance itself should not be overlooked in the slightest. Huge shoutouts to whoever voiced Nebulahub. You did an amazing job. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you gave the weirdest, most unnoticeable monster under normal circumstances its own solo? Well, you'd end up getting the number 5 spot on our list, Bellowfish. It doesn't appear to be much at all in the song at first. It adds to the song, yeah, but it's not really standing out on its own. It kind of falls between the cracks of the hugely impactful monsters like Wisp and Grumpire, so at most it ends up being a nice little tag-along with no real importance. But then it happens. The song creates a bridge using Bellowfish as the flipping main melody, effectively giving it a solo. This instantly raises it from being a forgettable charmer to being absolutely core to the song's entire flow. The bridge of the song is super interesting and also insanely beautiful, and Bellowfish is at the core front of both of those. It is really hard to place monsters past this point, as all of them are by far and away some of the best tracks in the entire franchise. So from this point forward, take these words with a pinch of salt, as anything could realistically be swapped around. At 4th place, we have Socks, easily one of the weirdest tracks on the entire island. One thing I'd be a fool not to mention is that this track is nearly impossible to recreate on certain apps, because it utilizes really minorly offbeat notes that truly embrace the saxophone's main goal, really rhythmically interesting melodies. Somehow, in some way, they managed to make this really rhythmically impossible to work track fit into the verse that already has two really rhythmically interesting monsters, like Nebulob and Rebro. And it works. It works really well, too. It's insane how well these three pair together when all of them are playing such drastically different rhythms. Overall, Socks is just flawless, one of those legendary tracks you get once in a blue moon. Third place, we have by far my personal favorite single track in the entire franchise, Fung Prey. If you think of Ethereal Island, chances are you're gonna be thinking of this track right here, as it is Ethereal Island. Its sound font is astounding, its composition is utter bliss, and its placement alongside Wisp and Ghast is just perfect. There are zero things wrong with Fung Prey. It is a perfect monster with a perfect track that adds to a perfect verse in a perfect song. It is easily the single greatest track on the island. There are two monsters who are better overall, but this single track eclipses every single track individually the next two share. It's that good. And to get to that, speaking of the next two, at number 2 we have Rebro, who is in the entirety of the song's percussion, let's be honest. Not only that, it's also absolutely the most intricate, complex, insanely interesting drum lines in the entire game. It perfectly fits every single mood, it sets the tone in every verse flawlessly, and engages us with a rhythm that's so utterly confusing and sways us through the confusion with confidence and power. Every single one of Rebro's tracks absolutely makes the verses they play in, and since it's Rebro, that pretty much means the entire song is defined by its percussion, since it's never stops playing. Here's where things get tricky, however. If the entire song is defined by this monster percussion, what could possibly beat it for the number 1 spot? Well, chances are, you already knew what it was from the moment you clicked on the video. Ghast on Ethereal Island is not only the best instrumental track on the island, it's the best instrumental track in all of MSM. It is the highlight of the franchise and stands out as the number 1 spot for Ethereal Island. It would take me hours to fully explain why this track is so amazing, yet it only takes seconds of listening to understand everything. Its main track that it plays in the Nebula part is in itself sheer beauty and grace. It has a perfect tone and bass line that in itself make the song one of the best. And then you have the second track. The track it plays in the Wisp verse is by far one of the most beautiful things I've ever listened to. And that's not an understatement. Ghast is a monster that shouldn't even be possible. The fact that it can add so much to the song, yet everything else feels so impactful on top of it, is a testament to MSM itself. Nothing else comes remotely close to Ghast on this island. Octopus on FJD is easily one of the best vocals in the franchise, yet to put it in the same league as Ghast on this island still feels wrong. Ghast just utterly eclipses everything with its quality. It's not even close. Alright, so Ethereal Island. Let's talk about it. It's easily one of the best songs in the entire franchise. Probably the best in the entire franchise. Once you remove the Dipsters and Wubbox. But here's where we hit the hard truth, as those two do exist. Because Dipsters and Wubbox exist in the song, it's the most extreme case of overflooding, and it suffers from that effect more so than any other island. Plant also slowly began to be bogged down from a really high point, but the difference between the two islands in terms of quality beforehand is shocking. Ethereal realistically deserves to be with Bone and Sugarbush in the highest tier, but I don't necessarily know if it's justifiable when the in-game version of the song is unlistenably disappointing. We were so close to perfection, so close to the absolute best ending to all of YSM, but instead, we're treated with BBB's biggest downfall. Whenever they find something truly amazing, they keep trying to replicate or add on to it until it's nothing more than a shell of its former glory. So, Ethereal Island. I really want to put it all the way up here, where it deserves to be. But it's not gonna get there because dipsters and wallbox exist. So instead, I'm gonna put it right here to join the others. You should probably take that with a pinch of salt because realistically, dipsters and wallbox probably make it like here. But I'm gonna put it in S simply because look at that bell curve. That's a perfect bell curve right there. There's not a lot that can be said about Ethereal Island that hasn't already been said. Without the two blemishes, it is the perfect song. It is the magnum opus of MSM. And nothing will ever come close to it. Except for maybe Bone. That has come pretty close to it. That's pretty much it. There's probably better explanations than that, but I don't really want to explain Ethereal Island. Just go listen to it. You're welcome. Now that that's done, I guess this is it. This is the MSM tier list. We've gone months, I think a year now. It took a year of work, but here it is. With constant in-depth study on every island. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I personally believe this is probably one of the most in-depth and, I don't want to say accurate, but most represented tier list that anyone has made. And I know a lot of people in the comments and stuff have disagreed with some of the placements. Like, I know people like Water, and I know people don't really like the FJD songs, but there's a key note I wanted to end off with. Just because things are high and low doesn't mean they're good or bad. Music is not that black and white. It more so has to do with concept and execution and things like that. Things like Ethereal Island. It wanted to be ethereal. It wanted to be serene. It wanted to be alien. Does the composition support that? Yes, it does. Does the execution support that? Yes, it does. Everything supports that except for its two awful tracks. Water Island wants to be calming, soothing. It wants to be serene and lullaby-esque. Does it do that in composition? You know, on a couple tracks. Does it do that in execution? No, not in the slightest. Not at all. I guess, at the end of the day, MSM is just a huge beast to tackle, and not everyone's going to agree on the same thing. That was a very long-winded outro, so let me keep it brief with this. We have one more island left, but I'm not going to be covering it in a traditional episode. We might need to wait a bit for this, because I have to set everything up to do it, but trust me, I haven't forgotten about the continent.